And welcome back to the Saturday edition of CFRA Live. Thank you so much for joining us. It is time for our weekly rundown panel. Joining us for the panel this morning is the former River Ward councillor. She is Maria McCrae. Maria, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Spring has almost sprung. We're getting there. A little cooler out there this morning, but we're getting there. Keenan Wellar is also here. He's the co-leader and director of communications with LiveWorkPlay. Keenan, good morning.
Good morning.
There's lots of wild stuff to talk about in the news this week. Just quickly, Keenan, though, I wanted to ask you, I spoke with Robin Meyers a few weeks ago, executive director at Total Communication Environment. We were talking about people living with developmental disabilities and the number of local agencies that kind of help serve them. And your agency is among them. Talking about long wait lists, funding shortfalls, just quickly just wondering about the urge for, I guess, funding in your industry right now from the provincial government.
Yeah, it's a tough one. There was a lot of different issues that made it into the headlines during the election. Ours was not so much one of them, but we're kind of on, and to be fair, it extends for many governments previous as well, but we're just kind of on a flat funding curve, which we all know if you graph that out with inflation means you're losing a lot of money. And basically, we're all trying to serve more people with effectively a lot less money. So it's not the most fun time to be doing this work, just for that basic struggle of trying to continue helping the people that we have been helping, but also there's so many people that want our services and struggle to understand why we can't do it, and they reach out to the closest connection, which is us and Robin's agency and everybody else, and saying why can't you help us? And it's just really critical because we help people get a really great start in life after coming out of high school, but also, especially with Robin's agency, she helps people with disabilities at the end of life as well. So when that doesn't happen, that gets pushed into other parts of the health system, and so it's really rough. So hopefully now the election's over, we can get back to discussions and get down to work with our minister and hopefully get some results.
And pushing for you too. I'll mention over 52,000 people in Ontario currently on a waiting list for critical support because of those funding shortfalls. So just wanted to highlight that, Keenan, because I did talk to one of your colleagues in the industry over the course of the past few weeks. But in the news this week, we've seen the latest, we'll call chaos when it comes to tariffs, right? We kind of escaped a little bit these so-called reciprocal tariffs on Wednesday, but the auto industry is also getting hit hard, 25%. The other 25% tariff still on steel and aluminum and anything that is not compliant with the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. I guess, Maria, you've been watching this unfold over the course of the past few days. Just how does it feel kind of watching all of the market reaction and how we're going to kind of handle this? It's seemingly a nonstop stream of anxiety.
Well, first of all, I think it's very sad when you look at the situation. I mean, for more than 150 years, we've been best friends, if you will, almost, with the United States. We've survived world wars, the Cold War. You look at what happened in Newfoundland, especially at 9/11, how Canada didn't even think twice about opening its arms, taking Americans in, walked side by side with their military in Afghanistan. So there's just so many things from the past and not too long ago that we can talk about. So I think it's frightening as well at the same time because we have so much uncertainty. But a lot has been said about the negativity, and we can all discuss that ad nauseum. But I want to go a little positive in a way too, because I think there's opportunity here. And for too long, I think Canada has been not necessarily living up to our potential. And right now we have an opportunity to recreate ourselves. And I want to agree with the Prime Minister when he talks about reestablishing even our global presence. So, for example, as many people know, I grew up in Sudbury and used to be called the nickel capital of the world. Well, there's huge opportunity up in Northern Ontario, for example, with those critical rare earth minerals. So maybe we start looking at the other side of it, which is Canada needs to get its act together with other things. So, should we be spending more in our military? And talk to anybody who's served in the military recently or retired even recently, and they'll tell you that we're not even doing that. Are we spending enough on NATO? So I think that much has been said about the negativity, and there's many things we could talk about down that path. But I also think that this is a great opportunity for Canada to establish trade with other countries, maybe that we haven't, so we are no longer as reliant on our neighbor to the south.
It's a fair point, and even showing leadership on like a global scale in some ways, and trying to nail down, in whether it is the mining sector or some other sector, to kind of try to take some leadership roles. We've seen a lot of U.S. doctors talking about coming to Canada as well. Maybe we become a new healthcare hub. I think it is kind of good to kind of look at some of the opportunities that do lay ahead of us. There's just going to be some probable pain to get there. But Keenan, watching the chaos this week, from the announcement to our reaction to the market reaction, I know we're all exhausted. What do you kind of take from the last few days?
Yeah, I really appreciate what Maria just said. And, it is such a huge customer of ours. We can't, fully replace it, but we can improve on the list that both of you discussed. I think that's really important. I have to admit, the whole thing, I'm just at like a level of emotion. Just waiting to come on the show. There's a little promo by Haley Wickenheiser saying, shop local. And I'm like shouting at the phone, I will, Haley, I will. Everything is just, so hard on sleeve these days. I've spent a lot of time crying over, patriotic partisan things, and easily moved in that direction. And, my wife and I actually have completely changed our habits. We were pretty local already, but we're almost as close to 100% as you can get. And I don't think it's not something that a lot of us are just going to do for 5 minutes or until this crisis passes. I think there's some permanent changes that will be very positive for local and national economy. So again, I'm trying to find a bright side to it all, because we can't just ignore the U.S. market. It's critical. But the things we can control, I think we're starting to make some really important shifts.
You mentioned kind of the emotional impact of this as well, just in many senses. I found myself just during that announcement this week, he's been talking for like 45 minutes. I'm just tell me what's happening. Just trying to figure out what's going on. But to the emotional point, it's kind of an end of an era. Like, we feel betrayed in some ways. It feels like, like we're coming to the end of a relationship. And it is kind of strange, right? To kind of come to this realization that, yes, there is an opportunity, but also, like, how did we get here to begin with?
Yeah, I also get angry because, every American I know says, well, I didn't vote for him. But, well, a lot of you sure did.
Somebody did, yeah.
Where everybody went. And you're not seen to be doing all that much about it, although I know there's some massive demonstrations all across the U.S. today about different things. But, yeah, there's also the anger factor, the sense of betrayal, and it's a loss. I think there's also a grieving. Like, all of us pretty much have connections, some of them really deep, into the U.S. So it's a really hard adjustment. And I also appreciate the kindness. Like, I've had random Americans reaching out to me that some of them I've just come in touch with over the years, like not even for an extended period of time, saying, sorry, like, this is brutal. I'm really sorry about what's happening, which is, also really touching and thoughtful.
Yeah, and somebody else, the Canadian saying sorry is also very interesting too. I just quickly, to put a point on this as well, just the idea of travel to the U.S. at the moment, I wanted to talk to you guys about, or ask you guys about, because, we have seen a lot of U.S. trips just canceled in pure solidarity over what's happening right now. We heard from an Ottawa travel agent last week saying it's just disappeared to zero. Essentially, they're doing more Canadian trips. So again, there's a great opportunity there for Canadian tourism here this summer, particularly. But we've also heard about Canadians getting detained. Maria, even if you had to go to the U.S. for work, do you think you'd feel comfortable about that right now, just given some of the stories we've heard?
Some of the stories are actually, again, to use the word frightening. The notion of a Canadian citizen maybe going across the border for a couple of days for a shopping trip, or maybe driving down to Florida, one of the snowbirds, driving to Arizona, and coming back and being detained at the border. You're hearing stories about that. And I'm hoping that that's the extreme stuff that we're hearing about, because often the stuff that sparks people to these big discussions are the extreme situations. So that concerns me. It's mind-boggling to get my head around all of this. But I do think, just going back 1 second on something that Keenan had said and used the word, I think we become more patriotic as a country because of this. And I think that our country is starting to unite in a way that I certainly didn't see happening. Certainly it's made the federal election more interesting, and I realize this is not staying on point, Andrew, but...
Well, we'll get there, trust me.
I think it has to be said, though, that all of a sudden we're talking more about our country as a whole from coast to coast. And the notion of the shopping, Keenan was talking about, shopping local and whatnot. I mean, there's so many great opportunities for people, small businesses. And I mean, if you look at globally, I've said this many times on your show and others, that the best economies of the world are driven by small business. Yes, big business is important, but it's small business. So, in getting back to the travel question, it concerns me when you hear some of these stories. I've got good friends that have been down in Arizona for a while, so when they come back, I want to find out what happened when they crossed the border because they did drive over. And it may be a little bit of rhetoric as well. I'm happy to concede that some of this may also just be good for good headlines.
But it is tough to watch just in general because you mentioned small business, and it seems like, from what I'm reading, small businesses on both sides of the border are kind of getting hit hard with this as well. So just not great for the small business owners. And, in a world where we have the Amazons and the monopolies, it's kind of sad to watch the small and medium businesses kind of take the biggest brunt of this as well. But just quickly on the travel question, Keenan, is, traveling to the U.S. something you would even consider right now, even if it was for something like work?
We took a bit of a hit. We had a trip planned with my best friend and his wife. We were going to see a concert in Las Vegas because it was frankly the easiest, cheapest place to see it, I got to admit. And we canceled it and took a hit and paid a lot more to go to Vancouver to see the AC/DC. So
patriotism does cost, apparently, in some ways. I wanted to actually, because Maria mentioned it too, just to kind of get into the federal election as well. I guess, Keenan, I'll start with you. Takeaways from week 2, we saw a number of candidates kind of expelled here. I mentioned, I think, a total of 7 between the Liberals and Conservatives. But to the point about kind of the patriotism, we have seen kind of a lot of the messaging getting very close between the Liberals and Conservatives. It seems like there is kind of a consensus of what Canadians are looking for right now. We are, it seems in some ways, kind of rejecting what we have seen south of the border. But what have you seen from the federal election campaign so far that's kind of stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think I don't want to oversimplify, but it seems like stylistically it's become really important to a lot of people that they want a certain style of leadership, especially. I mean, there's the sort of longer video where Carney's talking to Mike Meyers, and it ends up and he says, "Oh, it's kind of faint praise, but I think you're just kind of like reasonable." And I think that kind of summarizes a lot of what I'm seeing. We're not necessarily looking for the person with the zingers or the catchy 3-word jabs, that sort of thing. It seems to be turning people off, and if that's what you're used to doing, it's really hard to just suddenly be someone else. And I think Pierre Poilievre's been doing that really well for a very long time, probably one of the best. And it just doesn't seem the right timing for that. And I was a little worried. I watched some of the early press conferences with Mark Carney, and I thought, like he's going to get Joe Biden, like he's taking long pauses. It's a little slow. It's not all that exciting. And turns out that seems to be what a lot of people want. Just thoughtful, kind of long-form answers might be okay at this time. And it seems to be playing out well. But the one thing I did notice, I heard you talking about polling earlier, and absolutely things can change. But there was a recent poll on the how confident that people keep their promises, and that was devastating. It was 48 Carney, 27 Poilievre, and I don't know all the reasons for why that is, but something like that is really hard to overcome.
Yeah, it's some of the kind of deeper numbers that are kind of very interesting. Preferred PM as well. The difference as well, Mark Carney having an incredible amount of support from women, but lacking the support in men, where Pierre Poilievre is doing well too. So it's been fascinating to kind of watch. But to your point, I think people are looking for kind of boring right now, and that's where the campaign leaders are at least trying to head, to be that stable, kind of calm influence right now. Maria, what's been your takeaway, I guess, from 2 weeks of campaigning so far that's probably felt like 2 years?
I just can't wait for this thing to be over. I mean, honest to goodness, we just had the provincial election. We've been hearing about, a federal election coming for how many years now? People have been blathering on about call it, let's go. No, we're not. Yes, we are. I think Canadians want to see, what does the future look like? So if we have a certain leader, what is it going to look like for the next few years? It could be a minority government, and is there going to be more of the infighting and the back and forth, or are we going to have a stable majority government where we can say, okay, here's what we've got for the next X number of years? Because in speaking with people, it's first of all mind-boggling again to imagine how things turn so quickly starting in January. I mean, who would ever have thought we'd be having this conversation? So people who I think were were resigned to one government of one particular color are sitting here now saying, like, wow, like, maybe we do have choice. And maybe this is the best choice at the time. And so there's lots of discussions I'm hearing from people that are now open to actually talking about possibly voting for Liberal government again. And this was not happening for, I'd say, the last year or so. People have been talking about their frustrations and whatnot. So I think we have to have good debates on the issues for sure. But this he said, she said, gotcha, and I'm going to slam you, and your dad did this, and no, he didn't, yes, he did. How is that going to help us with the tariff situation, for example? How is that going to help healthcare? And that's what I find frustrating, is that the notion of the mudslinging that's supposed to be entertaining. How does that help the way Canadians feel today when we feel so nervous about what's happening with our finances?
Yeah, no, it's a very fair point. I think people want kind of a vision and kind of a positive aspect looking forward, right? So I think it is, off-putting for a lot of people, kind of the mudslinging that we do see during this campaign. And I suppose we did know it was going to be a little bit ugly, but also kind of interesting. People are really engaged right now. You know, the Liberals are leading in the polls with like 38% or 40% almost in some polls for the Conservatives, right? Like, that's good enough for a minority or majority government most times. So, the bases are there, and a lot of people are interested in this election. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it squares out for both the main party leaders here. I just wanted to squeeze in one more question. There was a call for improvements. This one specifically this week after a 3-vehicle crash that was turned deadly on Highway 138 in North Stormont in Eastern Ontario after a fatal crash there. But just kind of broadening this out a little bit more. I don't know if you guys see it out on the roads as well, but do we need to talk a little bit more about traffic safety in general? It just feels, either when I'm walking or I'm out in the car, that it feels like a lot of the time, Keenan, that I'm taking my life in my own hands in some cases.
I got to agree. I think the shift came, maybe as a bit of a post-pandemic shift, just in people's attitudes, or maybe a little less caring or concerned. But I have felt that as well. And also just the emphasis, we're just so focused on building and widening roads, but not really at all on using them properly. So I would share that concern. I don't drive as much as I used to. I've worked to reduce that, but I think it makes me one of those. I get a lot of fist waves just because I'm not, accelerating fast enough out of the intersection and things like that. So I've definitely felt some of there's a bit of an anger out there from people just, they want to get from place to place, and that's more important than making sure you don't run over a child or something.
Well, I guess a fist is better than a one-finger salute. But Maria, have you noticed this too? To Keenan's point, I thought I noticed this during the pandemic as well. When roads were clear, people were just driving faster. But it just seems like the roads are just a dangerous place out there right now, not even depending on where you are.
So I'm going to respectfully disagree with both of you about one thing, and that is this is not a new phenomenon. When I was in office, the most number one complained about thing in my office was traffic safety. And that was pedestrian traffic safety and vehicular traffic safety. I can tell you, I go out for a run every day. My husband and I are out walking every day, and constantly you're looking over your shoulder because someone's running a stop sign or they're rolling through it, and they look at you. I mean, this massive metal box is coming at you, and they wonder why are you even out there? Yeah. So to answer your question about what should be done or where are we at with this, absolutely, we need to focus and continue focusing on traffic safety, not just locally on our streets here, but also provincially. We drive Highway 17 often. It takes you up to Sudbury, and I can tell you how many times that we've been up there, and you see so many close calls. Yeah. And often it's these little whippersnappers that are buzzing by 4 or 5 cars in a 2-lane highway and then cutting in front at the last minute. And how many times do you read in the paper or hear on the radio thereafter, there's been a massive head-on collision that's closed down that highway. So certainly, I think that maybe when the roads were less full during the start of the pandemic, maybe people were driving a little faster, but I just see this as a continuation of some of the terrible driving habits that were taking place before. And the last comment on this is, look at the efficacy of those brilliant red light cameras and speed cameras. And people may not like them, but too bad. If you don't like the red light camera, then don't run the red light because you're probably going to hurt somebody. And when I was in office, I met a young woman who had been run over by a red light camera runner. And for years, she couldn't even get into a car. She was so traumatized. Never mind the physical injuries. You don't like speed cameras? Don't speed.
Yeah, no, preach, Maria, preach. We'll leave it there for a Saturday morning. Everybody kind of take care out on the roads. Keenan Wellar and Maria McCrae, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I very much appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
All right.
Thanks, gentlemen. Have a good weekend.
Elbows up. Maria McCrae is the former River Ward councillor. Keenan Wellar is the co-leader and director of communications at LiveWorkPlay here in Ottawa. It's their thoughts. Your thoughts welcome. Give us a text, 1-800-580-CFRA. We'll get to some of those coming up in the 9 o'clock hour. We'll take a break. We'll come back in that hour.